because it's Tom Mulcair's birthday today. Happy birthday, Tom Mulcair.
Thank you so much, Aaron and Natasha. Boy, what a great way to start the show. Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And what have you been doing different today for your birthday so far, Tom?
Went for a good long swim, but not in the lake. That's too cold by now. But we've got a great new aqua center up in St. Adele, and that was one of the things. And Catherine and I have been hanging out. We still got to see the kids, and tonight Catherine and I a nice supper together.
Oh, isn't that nice?
Are you going to wear your new sports jacket when you go out for dinner?
Yes, the one that Catherine got me. It's really nice, actually, and I'm going to be wearing it on La Joute tomorrow if you want to see it.
I can't wait, Tom. By the way, did you get a cake?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Our son, Matt, brought us a great
that's
cake.
nice.
Phenomenal cake, actually. No, it's really, really good.
Good. Well, happy birthday. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Let's jump in here and see what's going on. I guess we can start with Doug Ford. Tom, we talked about this, a couple of weeks ago? He said no need for me to go there, but apparently there is a need.
Well, this is turning out to be quite interesting because his first answer was always, I backed Mr. Trudeau's decision, and I still do. Fine. Great answer. And then people like you were saying, well, why doesn't he come and testify? Well, if the commission wants to hear from him, they can summons him, and he'll have no choice but to go in and testify. Lo and behold, after inviting him, and I'm doing air quotes as I say inviting, because you don't want to summons the Premier of Canada's largest province necessarily, well, they finally had to send a summons in full form because he had refused to accept their invitation. But now, lo and behold, he's fighting the summons. He doesn't want to go. So he's already put it out through his lawyers. He's saying, no, we're going to do what's called a judicial review. So you essentially attack the decision of the Commission of Inquiry's lead, who's Mr. Justice Rouleau, and you say, you don't have the jurisdiction to do that because I have parliamentary immunity as the leader of the province of Ontario, as does my Solicitor General. We're members of that government, and we have immunity. So this is really interesting. I call this putting a circle around the stain, because up until now it was, okay, you don't want to testify, fine. You're not going to voluntarily go in. Your choice. Now they've summoned you. You have to represent law and order. This is a society based on the rule of law. Mr. Ford, you've got to get in there. And he's fighting it. So it leads to the obvious question, okay, what's he trying to hide?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think he is trying to hide? And what's the big deal here? How badly could he do in those circumstances?
Well, there are 800 documents the government of Ontario has identified as being of interest. Now, that doesn't mean there are not a lot more than that, but these are the ones they say they've identified. But instead of turning those over to the Commission immediately and in one fell swoop, they're giving them in dribs and drabs. So even that is like, this is a Commission of Inquiry. This is of national interest. This is the first time the Emergencies Act has been used since it was enacted in the 1980s. Please, do the right thing and help apply the Commission of Inquiry's mandate. Help us get to the bottom of whether it was justified or not. And so they're stalling for the Premier to testify. They're stalling in producing documents. So there might be very seriously possible there's something in those documents that will be an embarrassment to Doug Ford and his government.
Now it's gotten interesting.
Getting more so all the time, yeah. So, Tom, let me move on and get to this.
Thickens.
Yeah, let me get to this other story. So CBC's done an analysis here, the federal government, on quite the hiring boom during the pandemic.
Well, I mean, they're doing so well in the federal government. If you look at the Immigration Department, what could go wrong? There's a backlog of 2.4 million people. We had the ArriveCan app that the Minister of Transport kept saying was fantastic, even though the Americans were begging us to get rid of it because it was gunging up the border. So now we find out that the reason everything is going so well is we've increased the size of the civil service by 12%. We have hired 35,000 new civil servants over the past 3 years. Now, to be fair, some of that is, of course, going to be to help process the checks, and that would be Revenue Canada, some of the work that had to be done getting the checks out the door, the emergency benefits and whatnot. But 35,000 new people? Really? For the results we're getting, I don't think we're getting good bang for our buck.
I kind of wonder, though, how do you explain this if you're the government exactly? Where's the rationale here?
Well, one of the things that surprises me the most is that the Trudeau government has some outstanding individual ministers. Okay, you don't find better than Carla Qualtrough or Anita Anand or Mark Miller. They're just really good ministers who know what they're doing. So the place that it's really getting messed up in the Trudeau government right now is at what we call the Privy Council office. It's just not getting anything done. Nothing's going out the door. There's no management of government activities. And this is something that everybody who's been in government, people who have been very senior civil servants have been looking at the current government and saying, okay, none of us have ever seen anything like this before, where a government is just breaking down in terms of its ability to get the job done. And this is where the Trudeau government is. Mr. Trudeau does a lot of things really well. He's a great representative for us on the world stage. He knows how to talk and connect with people better than anybody I've seen in my political career. But when it comes to actually running the shop, we've got huge problems in Canada right now.
That's so interesting, huh? I was thinking about, that it boils down to poor management, and then he's the boss at the end of the day.
Yes, and it's the Privy
simple.
Council office, of course, that is under his wing. That's essentially his ministry. The Prime Minister's office is basically the central nerve, the central brain of the policy and the politics of the government. But actually getting things done, that's through the Privy Council office. And yes, he is the minister in charge of the Privy Council office. Right now, it's Bill Blair, who's also the head of the PCO. He's got a key role to play. Also a very experienced person, a very good minister. But again, things are just completely breaking down in department after department, and there's going to be a price to pay for it long term. All these big fights that are shaping up between Poilievre, Trudeau, and I'm going to fire the governor of the Bank of Canada and all this stuff, that's not what matters right now. What people are going to look for in the next campaign is who can actually run the show.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
All right, let me move on to something else that's going on right now. And I started by talking about this today because I saw Jagmeet Singh over the weekend on whatever show it was, talking about the fact that, the Bank of Canada doing the wrong thing by raising interest rates. And he said the root cause of inflation is pretty obvious. It's the war in Ukraine and the supply chain management, to which I kind of snickered and said, yeah, and of course we have a lot of control over those, don't we? But regardless, the grocery industry, Tom, and there are some people poking around now, and I understand today Canada's competition watchdog is going to launch a study. Now, this is not about necessarily higher prices over the last little while. It's about the industry in general, right, and the competitive nature of it. What do you think about this?
Well, I think this is great news for consumers because there are limits to what the Competition Bureau can do. And you can't drill down on things that are as wide as the groceries network. The industry in and of itself is very complex, as they said in today's announcement. But they're going to be putting a little bit of pressure on the industry to start being a little bit more responsive to people. The inflation that's going on there is way above anything else, and there has to be an explanation for it that's objective and defensible. And if it's not, in other words, they're just following each other's price increases, then there's going to be pressure brought on them. Right now, it would be difficult to bring a prosecution, but if at the end of this study they realize that this is something that should get better control, they won't enjoy what happens for the future because it'd be the easiest thing in the world to tighten up the legislation a bit and to make sure that the grocery industry is brought under the wing of the Competition Bureau in a much more direct fashion.
Yeah, but by the same token, Tom, what if they find nothing? What if, I hate to say it this way because I know people say I'm naive. What if they find out that, their own costs have gone up because costs everywhere have gone up and they're just passing those along?
But then their profit margins...
Hang on a second. If that's the case, Tom, then what?
Let's say inflation generally is at 7%. Let's say that the groceries, the industry itself has seen its prices go up 7%. If they're passing along a 12 to 14% increase to consumers because everybody is going, hey, nobody will notice, everything's going up, and we can just start making huge profits.
Of course.
Once they start to make that adequate, they look at that equation between the two and they start saying, okay, this is price gouging by the industry, and they can start going after them. You're completely right. They're not immune from increases in costs. They're paying increased costs for everything themselves. But at the same time, if they're abusing of it, that's where the government can and should move in on behalf of all consumers.
Yeah, and I wasn't saying one way or the other they are or not. I'm just simply saying if that cost is 7% and they're paying 7 or 7.5%, maybe we can all try to get off.
On, sure.
Yeah, okay.
But if they're doubling down,
no, absolutely.
Going, let's take advantage of this.
I have a question.
Tom,
go ahead.
Well, I would like to know a little bit about who will be the next Prime Minister in the UK, Rishi Sunak. Certainly he, what I've been hearing about him so far is that he looks a lot more like an average Brit, but that he's also a very snappy dresser. I'd like to know a little bit more about what he brings to the table politically.
Well, it's a fascinating change. If you go back to the 1960s when you had political leaders saying that they wanted to limit immigration, in particular from India, and to have the grandson of immigrants from India becoming the prime minister of Great Britain. It's a fabulous bit of news for the change in that country's culture, history, and the way it looks at itself. And this is really good news. The terrible numbers for the Conservatives are going to start to turn around. I'm quite convinced. I mean, the Liz Truss thing is just one of those unbelievable reference points that we'll have in the future. You know, people will simply by saying, "Oh, yeah, this reminds me of Liz Truss." That's all the information that you need, and I think that Sunak's arrival is going to be a breath of fresh air for Great Britain as a whole and for the Conservative Party specifically. They're in power for the next couple of years, despite the fact that this is their third leader. And, he's going to have time to settle things down a little bit, work with the markets. The economy will start to turn around a bit. The biggest problem that they have was another weak Conservative prime minister whose name was Cameron, who, to get out of a bind, simply promised that, yeah, sure, we'll have a referendum on whether or not we leave Europe. How could that possibly go wrong? Well, we all know that that type of event, that type of referendum is not very felicitous. And what happened there is that they promised that they would withdraw. They had to pay tens of billions of pounds in penalties to Europe. And now they're starting to sink like a stone because their economy is no longer connected to Europe. So it's the worst time for them to have done that, and they're going to pay a heavy price for it in every sense.
Yeah. By the way, our inflation rate 6.9% in September in Britain. From what I read today, it's 10%. Their inflation rate.
Yeah,
so you get an idea what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
But look at we talk about hydro. Our prices are pretty well fixed long term. Look what's happening there. If you have to heat your house, because they don't have winter like us, but they still have to heat their houses during the winter.
All right. I wanted to get to Xi Jinping, but I guess we can do that tomorrow. So we'll do that tomorrow. Have a happy birthday, Tom. Enjoy it.
Thanks.